The scent of failure, if you were to ask Elara Russo, smelled exactly like burnt sugar and stale bread. That was the smell clinging to the air in her family's bakery, Russo's, a place that had once been a neighborhood beacon of warmth and buttery croissants. Now it was a ghost. The flour bins were half empty. The pastry case held more empty space than goods, and the small table where her mother used to tally the day's earnings sat covered in a fine layer of dust, and 3 new, terrifyingly official-looking envelopes. Final notice, foreclosure warning, notice of seizure. Elara, at 24, felt less like a woman and more like a dam holding back an ocean of debt. It wasn't her debt, not really. It was the crushing weight of medical bills her mother's illness had left behind, a brutal, ink-black tally that had devoured their savings, their home equity, and finally, their future. She was talented, her hands capable of spinning sugar into delicate flours and kneading dough into airy perfection, but she couldn't bake her way out of this. This particular Tuesday was worse. The last of the wholesale accounts had just called to cancel. Her apron, dusted with flour, felt less like a uniform and more like a shroud. She was wiping down the spotless, empty counter when the bell above the door chimed, a sound so rare it made her jump. A woman in a crisp beige suit stood there, holding a tablet. Elara Russo. Yes? I'm from Events & Co. Your temp catering application was acceptable. The woman's eyes swept the empty bakery with a faint, undisguised pity. It's a serving job. Tonight. 6 p.m. sharp. Black slacks, white shirt. The Davenport estate. It was like hearing someone casually mention Mount Olympus. The Davenports were the city. Old money, new tech, whispered scandals. I'll be there, Elara said, her voice betraying no emotion. Excellent pay wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline. The Davenport estate was not a house. It was a fortress of glass and stone perched on a hill overlooking the city Elara was currently drowning in. The gala was for an art unveiling, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low murmur of power. Elara balanced a tray of champagne flutes, her heart a cold knot of anxiety. She was invisible here, a ghost in a different machine, and she preferred it that way. She navigated clusters of people discussing stock prices and summering in the Hamptons. Watch it, sweetheart. A man with a booming voice and a whiskey-red face gesticulated wildly, his hand striking the edge of her tray. It happened in slow motion. The clink, clink, shatter of crystal on marble, the icy splash of champagne, and the sudden, horrific silence. Elara was on her knees, desperately trying to gather the sharp, glittering shards of glass, the cold, sticky liquid seeping into the knees of her cheap slacks. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. For God's sake, the man boomed, get this clumsy girl out of here. It's quite all right, David. Accidents happen. The voice was cold, sharp, and cut through the chaos like a scalpel. A man stepped out of the crowd. He was tall, dressed in a suit so perfectly tailored it seemed molded to him. His hair was dark, his features were sharp, and his eyes were a shade of gray so pale and devoid of warmth they looked like polished stones. He didn't look at Elara. He looked at the man who had knocked the tray. "I believe," the cold man said, "you've made your point. Now, if you'll excuse us." He radiated an authority so absolute that the red-faced man simply deflated, stammering an apology and melting back into the crowd. Then he turned. His gaze finally landed on Elara, still on the floor, and it was like being analyzed by a supercomputer. "Get up," he said. It wasn't kind. It was an order. I'm so sorry, sir." "Stop apologizing." He gestured to another server. "Clean this. You," he pointed at Elara, "go to the kitchen. You're done for the night." "Please," she whispered, the word tearing from her. "I need this job." He was about to say something dismissive and final, when a gasp echoed from the top of the grand staircase. "Area!" A frail, elderly woman in a wheelchair, draped in pearls, was leaning forward, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fragile hope. She was pointing at Elara. "Area! My girl! You came back!" The woman's hand went to her chest. She gasped, her breath catching. A heart monitor beside her wheelchair began to beep, frantic and high-pitched. "Matilda!" a younger woman shrieked. Nurses and family members rushed forward. Elara was frozen, her hand still holding a shard of glass. "Area!" The old woman, Matilda Davenport, whispered it one last time before her eyes closed, her body slumping. "Get her out of here!" the cold man snapped at Elara, his voice low and furious. "Now!" Elara fled. She ran through the service corridors, pushed open a back door, and didn't stop running until she was 2 blocks away, her heart hammering against her ribs, the name Area echoing in the cold night air. The next day, the bakery felt even more like a tomb. Elara was on the phone, begging the bank for an extension she knew she wouldn't get, when the bell chimed. It was him, the man from the gala. In the harsh light of day, he looked even more imposing. His suit was dark gray, his tie was silk, and his face was a mask of cold control. He placed a slim, leather-bound business card on the counter. Julian Blackwood, attorney at law, Davenport Council. "Mr. Blackwood," Elara said, her hands clenching into fists on the counter. "Look, about last night, I don't know who she thought I was." "I do," Julian said. He gestured to a framed, faded photo on the wall, the only personal item in the shop. It was Elara's grandmother, a beautiful woman with high cheekbones and striking eyes. "Your grandmother. Who was she?" She was a Russo. She worked for a wealthy family, as a maid, before she met my grandfather." "Why?" Julian's eyes were laser-focused. "That wealthy family was the Davenports, and your grandmother, it seems, had a secret." He pulled a photograph from his briefcase. It was an old black-and-white portrait of a young woman. Elara's blood ran cold. It was her grandmother. No, it wasn't. It was her. It was her face, her eyes, her exact features staring back from a 50-year-old photograph. "That," Julian said, "is Aria Davenport, the family's lost heiress, Matilda's daughter, who ran away from home at 18, vanished without a trace, and was rumored to have had a child. It seems that child was your mother, and you are the spitting image of the woman who broke Matilda's heart." Elara sank onto a stool, her legs giving out. I I don't understand. Matilda Davenport is dying, Julian said, flatly, his tone clinical. Last night's shock, it triggered a severe cardiac event. She is stable, for now. Her one dying wish is to see Arya. She believes you are her long-lost granddaughter returned. But I'm not, Elara whispered. I'm a baker. My name is Elara Russo. That is an inconvenient fact, Julian agreed. He looked around the decaying bakery, his eyes landing on the stack of foreclosure notices. You're in trouble, Miss Russo. Deep trouble. By my calculations, you are 3 days from being homeless. What do you want? She asked, a new, cold anger rising. He leaned in, his voice dropping. I am proposing an arrangement. A business transaction. He slid a thick document folder across the counter. The Davenport fortune is vulnerable. A corporate rival, Arthur Thorne, is initiating a hostile takeover. He is exploiting a clause in the company charter, a family vote clause. To ratify any merger, the entire family board must vote, and that board includes one empty seat. Arya Davenport's. You need a vote, Elara said, understanding dawning. I need a body, Julian corrected. I need Arya to appear, to sit in a chair, to smile at her grandmother, to stabilize the company's stock long enough for me to counter the takeover. I need 6 months. He tapped the folder. In this folder is a contract. You will impersonate Arya Davenport for 6 months. You will live in the estate. You will follow my every instruction. You will convince the world, and most importantly, Arthur Thorne, that you are the real thing. And in return? She asked, her voice trembling. $1 million, Julian said, without blinking, transferred to a private account. Enough to save this bakery. Enough to save yourself 10 times over. Elara stared at him. It was insane. It was a lie. It was a way out. It's a performance, Ms. Russo. You were a server at a gala. Now you're an actress on a much bigger stage. The role of a lifetime. Do we have a deal? The transition from Elara Russo, baker, to Arya Davenport, heiress, was brutal and swift. Elara didn't move into the Davenport estate. She was moved into a secure, sterile, glass-walled penthouse owned by Julian Blackwood, a place as cold and forbidding as the man himself. Rule number 1, he said, pacing the minimalist living room. Elara Russo is dead. You are Arya. You do not bake. You do not know the price of milk. You have a vague artistic sensibility and a troubled, mysterious past. You will speak only when spoken to. Your default expression is polite disinterest. He was a harsh, relentless teacher. The boot camp began at dawn. There were etiquette lessons, posture drills, and late-night study sessions where he grilled her on the Davenport family tree. Who is Clara Davenport? Matilda's sister. Your grand aunt? She's kind, naive, obsessed with her rose garden. Who is Marcus Davenport? Matilda's nephew. Your cousin? He's... The file says head of acquisitions and socially active. The file is polite, Julian snapped. Marcus is a greedy, entitled fool. He believes the company should be his. He is jealous, weak, and therefore dangerous. Do not trust him. He taught her how to walk, not with the hurried efficiency of a server, but with the slow, deliberate glide of a woman who has never had to rush anywhere in her life. He corrected her speech, smoothing out the warm, colloquial edges of her neighborhood dialect. Not "Hi," he'd say, rubbing his temples. "It's good evening. Not sure, but of course." She hated him. She hated his cold precision, the way he looked at her as if she were a flawed piece of code he was debugging. But deep down, she also admired his terrifying competence. He was building a new person from scratch, and he was leaving nothing to chance. Her first test was a small charity luncheon at the City Art Museum. A soft launch, Julian called it. Clara and Marcus will be there. You will smile, nod, and discuss the light. Elara, dressed in a pale blue silk dress that cost more than her oven, felt like a fraud. Clara, a woman with a kind, flustered face, immediately enveloped her in a lavender-scented hug. "Oh, Aria, dear, to have you back! You look so healthy." Marcus, however, was a different story. He was handsome in a slick, overconfident way, and his eyes, as he kissed her hand, were cold and assessing. "Cousin," he said, his voice a smooth purr. "What a resurrection. We must catch up. In fact, there's an art auction next week. I insist you come. You always did have a passionate eye for acquisitions." Elara froze. A test. "I'd be delighted." The words in her new, stilted area voice sounded almost convincing. Later at the luncheon, Elara found herself seated next to an elderly patron, Mrs. Albright, who was droning on about her health. Elara, forgetting her polite disinterest, found herself saying, "You know, my grandmother used to say that a bit of warm honey and thyme could soothe almost any cough. The oils in the thyme." She caught herself, horrified. But Mrs. Albright was beaming. "What a wonderful, old-fashioned remedy! You are such a delight, my dear. Not at all what I expected." From across the room, she saw Julian watching, his jaw tight. When they left, he was silent in the car for a full 5 minutes. "Honey and thyme?" he finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm sorry, It was brilliant," he interrupted, shocking her. "Clara is charmed, Mrs. Albright thinks you're a homespun saint, and Marcus is confused. Your baker's intuition is an unconventional asset. But don't get comfortable. The real test is coming." The real test, it turned out, was Arthur Thorne. Elara was formally introduced to her grandmother, Matilda, in a quiet private room at the estate. The old woman was frail, her skin like parchment, but her eyes were sharp. She held Elara's hand, weeping softly. "My girl, my Aria, I knew you'd come home." The guilt was a physical, stabbing pain in Elara's chest. This was not a performance. This was a cruelty. "She's fragile," Julian warned as they left the room. "Her heart cannot take another shock, which is why your performance must be flawless." "This isn't a performance anymore," Elara whispered. It's monstrous." "It is necessary," Julian replied, his face hard. "And the monster is now at the bait." Arthur Thorne was waiting in the grand hall. He was the opposite of Julian. Charming, all smiles with a politician's handshake and warm brown eyes that missed nothing. He was, Elara thought, far more dangerous. "Miss Davenport," Thorne said, bowing over her hand. "Aria, what a pleasure. The prodigal returns. I must say the city has been far less vibrant without you." "Mr. Thorne," Elara said, her voice a cool echo of Julian's training. "A pleasure." I knew your father, you know. He and we had some energetic disagreements. He loved that silly boat of his, the Arias Folly. Tell me, do you still get seasick on the 1st of July? It was a trap, a pinpoint-specific memory. Elara's mind went blank. She could feel the sweat prickling at her hairline. Aria's memory is her own business, Arthur. Julian materialized at her side, his hand resting on the small of her back. The touch was proprietary, possessive. It was also, for a fraction of a second, warm. Of course, we will have so much time to catch up. So much. As they walked away, Elara was trembling. Julian's hand was still on her back. He knows, Elara whispered. No, he suspects. And he will not stop until he's right, which brings us to the auction. Marcus. Yes, Marcus. He's planning something with Thorn. I saw them at the gala by the fountains. A passing of a note. Thorn is using Marcus to set a trap for you, and we are going to walk right into it. The night of the auction was a blur of diamonds and hushed, frantic bidding. Marcus was glued to Elara's side, his charm oily and oppressive. There, he suddenly hissed, pointing to a small, dark landscape painting. Lot 112, a lost Renoir. Father adored Renoir. You must have it, Aria. A welcome home present to yourself. I don't know. Nonsense. For you, cousin. He raised her paddle. 1 million. The room went quiet. 1 million from Miss Davenport, the auctioneer cried. 2 million, a voice called from the back. It was Arthur Thorn. He winked at Elara. He's playing with me, Elara whispered to Julian, who stood a few feet behind her. Yes, Julian said, his voice calm in her ear. He had given her a discreet earpiece. Marcus is pushing you to buy. Thorn is driving up the price. This is a setup. But why? 2.5, Marcus shouted, grabbing her paddle again. 3 million, Thorn countered. Julian, what do I do? Wait, I'm running the lot number. There was a furious typing sound in her ear. It's a forgery, a very good one, but the provenance is fake. It was debunked last year in Paris. Elara's blood chilled. If she bought it, she'd be a fool. If she backed down, she'd look weak. But if she was exposed as buying a fake, Thorn could spin it as her being either stupid or worse, complicit in the fraud. 3.5, Marcus urged, his hand on her arm. Arya, do it! Julian. Stall, he commanded. Create a diversion. Elara looked at Marcus, at Thorn, at the painting. Excuse me, she said, her voice clear and carrying. Mr. Auctioneer, I have a question. The lighting here is so dramatic. Could we perhaps see the piece in a more honest, natural light? My father always said a painting's true soul is only visible in the plain light of day. The room buzzed. It was an odd, eccentric request. Miss Davenport, that is highly irregular. But for a lost Renoir, I think we can all agree irregularity is part of its charm, no? Thorn was no longer smiling. Marcus looked furious. It's done, Julian's voice said in her ear. I just sent the file on the forgery to the auctioneer's private tablet, anonymously. He's reading it now. The auctioneer looked down at his screen. His face went pale, then red. He cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, there appears to be a slight discrepancy with the listed provenance of Lot 112. We will be withdrawing the piece from the auction temporarily. We apologize. A wave of gasps and angry murmurs. In the confusion, Julian was at her side. "Well done," he said, his voice so low only she could hear it. His hand found hers, a brief, tight squeeze. "Let's get you home." As they left, she saw Marcus and Thorne in a furious, whispered argument. The trap had failed, but Elara knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that they were just getting started. The war had just begun. What a moment! Elara has survived her first major test, but you and I both know this is far from over. Arthur Thorne isn't the kind of man to give up. If you're enjoying this story and want to find out what happens at the Grand Gala, this is the perfect moment to take a second and hit that subscribe button. It lets me know you're here and you won't miss the rest of Elara and Julian's journey. All right, let's get back to the story. The gala is about to begin. The weeks after the auction settled into a new, dangerous rhythm. Elara's performance as Aria became less of a performance and more of a second skin. She learned to navigate the shark-infested waters of high society, her baker's intuition and Julian's cold logic proving a surprisingly effective combination. She grew closer to Matilda, spending afternoons in the sunroom, listening to the old woman's stories. The guilt was a constant, dull ache. She was stealing these moments, this peace, from a dying woman. Julian, too, was changing, or perhaps she was just seeing him differently. The late-night study sessions continued, but they were softer. He would appear with tea. It's chamomile. It's supposed to be calming. And they would talk, not about family history, but about her bakery, her mother, her dreams. He, in turn, spoke of the law, not as a job, but as a system of logic, a way to impose order on a chaotic world. She saw the man behind the logic, the exhaustion in his eyes, the fierce, almost desperate loyalty to the Davenport legacy, a legacy he seemed to be protecting single-handedly. One evening, they were reviewing security protocols for the upcoming Davenport Grand Gala, the annual event that was, this year, doubling as a welcome home aria party. Thorne and Marcus will use the gala, he said, his eyes scanning a floor plan. It's too public, too chaotic. It's the perfect place to try and expose you. What are they planning? That's the problem. I don't know. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, and for the first time, looked truly tired. Elara, be careful. Tonight, don't leave my sight. He had used her real name. It slipped out, a simple, unthinking mistake, and it hung in the air between them, more intimate than a touch. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and the mask was gone. In its place was something raw, something vulnerable. "Julian?" she whispered. He stood up abruptly, the moment shattered. "Aria, be careful. That is all." The gala was a nightmare of flashing cameras and false smiles. Elara in a deep emerald gown that Julian himself had picked. Green. It brings out the strength in your eyes. Felt like a queen on a chessboard, waiting for the first move. Thorne was there, all charm and teeth. Marcus was at his side, looking pale and nervous. "Aria, darling," Marcus gushed, kissing her cheek. "There's someone I desperately want you to meet. In the conservatory. A surprise from our childhood." Elara's heart hammered. "Julian," she whispered, looking around. He was across the room, pinned by a group of board members. "Don't be shy, cousin," Marcus said, his hand firmly on her elbow, steering her toward a set of glass doors. This was it. The trap. She had to go. If she refused, it was an admission of guilt. The conservatory was dimly lit, scented with jasmine and damp earth. Arthur Thorne was waiting by a fountain, and beside him stood a mousy-looking woman in a plain dress. "Aria," Thorne beamed. "How wonderful. You remember Sarah, don't you? Your governess? Your tutor from your summers in Switzerland? She was just telling me she has so many specific memories of you." The woman, Sarah, looked at Elara with cold, dead eyes. This wasn't a governess. This was an actress, a paid executioner. "Aria, my dear, do you remember the time you broke your arm falling from the apple tree? The one with the—" Elara was trapped. Her mind was blank. Switzerland? Apple trees? She looked at Thorne, who was smiling, a predator sensing the kill. Suddenly, the world went red. A deafening whoop, whoop, whoop of a fire alarm blared through the estate. Red emergency lights began to flash, casting the conservatory in a hellish, strobing light. "What in the—" Thorne began, his head snapping toward the door. In the chaos, a hand grabbed Elara's, hard. "It's me. Trust me." It was Julian. He wasn't looking at Thorne, he was looking at her. He pulled her hard, not towards the panicking crowd, but toward a small, unmarked door at the back of the conservatory. A service passage. "Julian, what did you do?" she panted as he pulled her down a dark, narrow corridor. "Bought us time," he said, his voice grim. He pushed open a door, shoving her inside, and followed, closing it just as footsteps, Thorne's, Marcus's, pounded past. They were in a pantry. It was dark, cramped, and smelled of polished silver and old wood. They were pressed together, his chest to her back, the alarm still screaming in the distance. Elara's back was flush against his front, his hand still gripping hers, his other hand braced against the wall by her head. The proximity was overwhelming. She could feel the heat of his body, the frantic beat of his heart against her shoulder blades. Or maybe that was her heart. She couldn't tell. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his breath warm in her ear. "Yes," she breathed. The alarm stopped. The sudden, absolute silence was heavier, more charged than the noise. They were alone, in the dark, hidden from the world. He had a woman," she stammered. "A governess." "I know," Julian said. "I saw them. I've been tracking Sarah. She's a low-level actress. Thorne's been paying her for weeks." You pulled the fire alarm." It wasn't a question. "An unfortunate and timely mechanical failure," he said. His voice was different, not cold, not professional. It was rough. She turned in the small space, a difficult, awkward movement, until she was facing him. She couldn't see his face, only his silhouette against the sliver of light from the door crack. "Julian," she said, her voice shaking, "you saved me." "It's my job," he said, but the words were hollow. "No, that wasn't your job. That was something else." She could feel the tension radiating off him, a tightly coiled spring. He was at war with himself. She could sense it. The logical lawyer versus the man? "Elara," he said, his voice a low growl of warning. "Don't." "Or what?" she challenged, her own fear replaced by a strange new boldness. "Or you'll write a clause about it?" She felt, more than saw him, inhale sharply. And then his control snapped. His hand came up. not to push her away, but to cup her face. His fingers were cold, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, a jolt of electricity. "You have no idea," he whispered, "what you are doing." "Neither do you," she whispered back. He leaned in. She could feel his breath, smell the faint, clean scent of his suit. This was it. The world had melted away. There was no contract, no lie, no thorn. Only this, the darkness, the silence, and his mouth, inches from hers. He was going to kiss her. She was going to let him. And then, his training, his ironclad self-control reasserted itself. He flinched, pulling back as if he'd been burned. This is not part of the arrangement," he said, his voice strained and harsh. "It's a performance, Julian," she said, throwing his own words back at him, her voice bitter with the disappointment she hadn't known she was capable of. "Isn't it?" He was silent. He opened the door, checked the hallway. "It's clear. We'll say you had a panic attack from the alarm. It's plausible." He was back, the cold, calculating lawyer, the man who had almost kissed her, the man with the fire in his hands, was gone. "Come, Arya," he said, his back to her. "The party is waiting." But as they walked back into the light, Elara knew something was irrevocably broken. Or perhaps something was irrevocably built. A week later, Julian was in his office when his private investigator called. "I found her," the PI said, his voice tinny over the speaker. Julian's blood ran cold. "Found who?" "Arya. The real Arya. Or what's left of her. She's not an heiress. She's in a long-term care facility in Arizona. A rehab clinic. She's been there for years. She has no interest in the family or the money. She just wants to be left alone." Julian stared at the wall. The path was clear. He could extract Elara. He could use this new information, the real heiress, however broken, to solve the legal problem. He could end this. He could end the lie. He could end the complication that was Elara Russo. He looked at the file on his desk. It was a proposal Elara had written, a plan to turn the failing Davenport charity wing into a series of community-run bakeries, teaching skills to at-risk youth. It was brilliant. It was passionate. It was her. He had a choice, the logical, clean choice, or the messy, complicated human choice. "The file," Julian said to the PI. "Bury it. You never found her. Understood?" "But Mr. Blackwood." "You never found her." He hung up the phone. He had just made his own deal with the devil. He was no longer protecting the Davenport legacy. He was protecting Elara. And he had just kept her in a cage, even when the key was in his hand. He then made a second call. "Marcus, we need to talk. I know about you and Thorn, and I have proof. Meet me now." Julian Blackwood, the man of logic, had chosen chaos. The 6-month deadline approached like a storm front, dark and heavy with unspoken promises and inevitable betrayals. The final board vote, the one that would stop Thorn's takeover, was scheduled for a Monday. The Saturday before, everything fell apart. Julian, having successfully blackmailed Marcus into submission, "You will vote with the family, Marcus, or your friend Arthur will receive this file detailing your gambling debts," believed he had contained the threat. He had underestimated Thorne's venom. Elara had spent the morning with Matilda, reading poetry. The old woman's health was failing, but her spirit was bright. A light Elara felt was lit by a lie. The guilt was a physical weight, suffocating her. "I have to tell her," she told Julian that afternoon, finding him in the library. I can't do this anymore. After the vote, I will tell her the truth." "Elara," he said, his face weary, "the truth will kill her." "The lie is killing me," she shot back. "What happens in 2 days? The contract is up. The money is paid. I just walk away and leave her, leave you, and pretend this never happened?" "Yes," he said, his voice cold, the mask slamming back into place. "That was always the deal." The words hit her like a slap. The warmth of the pantry, the almost kiss, the late-night talks, all of it, just a part of the deal. "You're a bastard," she whispered, her heart breaking. "I am a lawyer," he corrected. "I honor contracts. I suggest you do the same." She fled the room, tears of rage and humiliation blinding her. She didn't see the email that had just arrived on Julian's laptop. An email from an anonymous source. An email containing a high-resolution photo of Elara Russo in her flour-dusted apron, standing in front of her bakery. An email with the subject line, "The board meeting. Be there." Thorne, having realized his pawn, Marcus, had been turned, had decided to burn the entire chessboard. The board meeting was held in a cavernous, wood-paneled room. Matilda was there in her wheelchair, looking frail but determined. Marcus was pale, avoiding everyone's eyes. Julian was at the head of the table, all ice and control. Elara sat beside Matilda, her hands clenched in her lap. "Let's begin," Julian said. "The vote on the rejection of the Thorne-Merriweather acquisition." "Not so fast, Julian." The doors burst open. Arthur Thorne strode in, flanked by 2 lawyers, a smug, triumphant smile on his face. "Arthur," Matilda said, her voice thin, "this is a negotiation. This is a private meeting." "Oh, but I have a vested interest, Matilda," Thorne said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm here to save you from her." He threw a stack of photographs onto the polished table. They scattered like dead leaves. Elara at the bakery. Elara in her server uniform. Elara's driver's license with the name Elara Russo. "This," Thorne announced to the room, "is not Aria Davenport. This is Elara Russo, a bankrupt baker, a common grifter." The room went silent. Matilda looked at the photos, her hand trembling as she picked one up. She looked at Elara, her eyes wide with a dawning, catastrophic horror. Aria? Elara couldn't breathe. She looked at Julian. His face was a stone mask. He was already calculating, already planning his next legal move. "And you," Thorne said, pointing a finger at Marcus, "you knew, didn't you? In fact, you helped me. This is an invoice for a private investigator paid by you, Marcus, to find information on this imposter." "No, he... So not only do you have a fraud," Thorne said, his voice booming, "you have a traitor in your midst. The Thorne legacy is a sham." Matilda made a small, wounded sound. Julian stood up. "This is slander, Arthur. These pictures prove nothing. You have no..." "Stop." The word was quiet, but it cut through the room. Elara was on her feet. Her face was pale, but her eyes were dry. She was done. Done with the lies, done with the performance, done with Julian's cold, suffocating control. "He's right," she said, her voice ringing with a terrible, beautiful clarity. "My name is Elara Russo. My grandmother, I own a bakery, or I did. I'm in debt. And Mr. Blackwood, he offered me a deal." She turned to Matilda, the tears finally coming hot and fast. He offered me money to pretend, to be her, to be Arya. I took it. I was desperate. I am so, so sorry." The confession hung in the air, brutal and final. Matilda stared at her, her face ashen. The heartbreak in her eyes was a physical wound. She didn't look at Julian. She looked at Elara, and in her gaze there was a universe of betrayal. "Get out," Matilda whispered, her voice cracking. "All of you, get out." Julian was already gone. Sometime during her confession, he had simply vanished. His chair was empty. His career, she knew, was over. Elara walked out of the boardroom. She didn't take the money. The account was untouched. She didn't take the emerald dress. She walked out of the Davenport estate, leaving the lie behind, and returned to her empty bakery. The locks were changed. A new bright red "Sold" sign was plastered on the window. She was, just as Julian had calculated, homeless. She had lost everything. Weeks turned into a month. Elara found a job at a small, anonymous coffee shop on the other side of town. It was grueling work, scalding steam and the smell of burnt coffee, but it was honest. She found a tiny one-room apartment above a noisy bar. She was poor. She was tired, but she was free. She heard snippets. The Davenport stock had plummeted, then stabilized. Arthur Thorne, in his arrogance, had overplayed his hand. His own board, spooked by his public vindictive tactics, and a timely, anonymous leak of his own creative accounting, courtesy of a now unemployed Julian Blackwood, had ousted him. The Davenport Corporation, battered and bruised, survived. She never heard from Julian. He had disappeared. The penthouse was empty, his law firm scrubbed from the building directory. It was as if he had never existed. One rainy Tuesday, she was wiping down the espresso machine, her back aching, when the bell on the shop door jingled. "I'll be right with you," she said, not looking up. "Take your time. I'm told this is a place for unconventional skills." She froze. She knew that voice, the cold, precise cadence, even when laced with a strange, new hesitation. She turned. It was Julian. He was different. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in jeans, a worn leather jacket, and a plain gray shirt. He looked tired. He looked human. "Julian?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Elara." He stood there, dripping rainwater on the cheap tile floor, looking utterly out of place. I've been looking for you." "Well," she said, gesturing to the shop, a bitter laugh escaping her. "Here I am." "No," he said, taking a step closer. "Not here. I ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had never seen before. He was nervous. He bought something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of keys. He laid them on the counter, next to a stack of napkins. I don't understand. The bakery, Russo's. I used my severance package, what was left of it. I bought it back. It's yours. The deed, the title, it's all in your name. Clean. No debt. She stared at the keys, her mind unable to process. Why? After everything, I ruined you. No, he said, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time she saw the full, unshielded truth in them. I ruined myself long before I met you. He took a breath. Elara, I need to confess something. A breach of contract. My own. Julian, the real Aria. I found her. Weeks before the board meeting. I found her. She's in a clinic. She's alive. She wanted nothing to do with the family. Elara felt the floor tilt. You knew? You knew, and you let me. I kept you there, he said, his voice raw with self-loathing. I had a legal, clean way out. I could have used her legal signature, to stop Thorn. I didn't need you, not for the vote, but I needed you. I kept you there. I lied. My lie, Elara, it was worse than yours. You lied for survival. I lied because I was a coward. I lied because I couldn't let you go, he whispered. The coffee shop was silent, save for the hum of the cooler and the rain on the window. So, she said, her voice shaking, what is this? The keys? A guilty conscience? No, he said. It's an offer, a new bargain. He pushed the keys closer. The bakery is yours, no strings. You can take these keys, walk out that door, and never see me again. God knows you've earned that right. She looked at the keys. She looked at his face, the face of a man who had torn down his own fortress and was standing in the ruins. Or, she prompted, her heart a wild, frantic drum. Or, he said, his voice breaking, I could consider a partner. I'm starting a new firm. It's small. It's just me, in a tiny office above a pizza place. It's not impressive, but I find I am in need of someone with a very specific, unconventional skill set. Someone who knows how to spot a forgery. Someone who isn't afraid to pull a fire alarm. A slow, watery smile broke out on Elara's face. A partner? Is the pay any good? Terrible, he said, a ghost of his old dry wit returning. But the benefits are negotiable. He didn't move. He just stood there, vulnerable, waiting. He had given her all the power, the keys, the truth, the choice. Elara looked at the keys to her old life. Then she looked at the man offering her a new one. She picked up the keys. His face fell, the hope draining from his eyes. She walked around the counter, past him, and stopped at the door. She unlocked it, pushed it open, and took a deep breath of the rain-washed air. Then she turned back. She tossed the keys onto the counter. The coffee here is terrible, by the way, she said. I know, he stammered. And that office, above the pizza place, I hope you like the smell of garlic. She walked back to him, stopping just inches away. She reached up, her hand touching his rain-damped cheek. And my salary, counselor, she whispered, is going to be exorbitant. He made a sound, a low groan, a sound of a man who had been holding his breath for a lifetime. And then he kissed her. It was not a performance. It was not a lie. It was not a breach of contract. It was a confession, It was a new bargain, and in the middle of a cheap coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday, it was, in its own unconventional way, absolute perfection. And that is where we leave Elara and Julian at the start of their new, honest bargain. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I have a question for you. What was the exact moment you think Julian truly fell for Elara? Was it in the pantry? Or was it way back at the beginning in the bakery? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.